Those sexy lads Greg and Rob are on assignment. They have programmed me, Shirley, to host this episode of Sin Sci-fi. George H. Smith at 100. George Henry Smith was born in 1922. I don't know what he did for the first half of his life, but his short story, The Last Spring, was published in Startling Stories in August of 1953. Publications such as If, Fantastic Universe, and Galaxy carried his sci-fi stories like Witness and Benefactor throughout the 50s. A few stories were even translated into French and German. Like many sci-fi writers, Smith was lured by his agent, Forrest J Ackerman, into a new venture, adult paperback writing, a burgeoning field that paid decently as many sci-fi outlets dried up for a myriad of reasons. For many, like Smith, it was the first opportunity to publish a short novel. For Epic, France Books' older brother, he wrote, in 1961, Scourge of the Blood Cult, 1976, Year of Terror, and the highly collectible Satan's Daughter. Smith hadn't any qualms mixing sci-fi and sleaze, unlike some sci-fi writers at France. His pal Charles Nutzel, for example, although Nutzel actually did 3 times. In a letter to Paperback Parade number 32, Smith stated that he was not the George H. Smith that wrote Swamp Lust for novel books in 1960 or other such swamp and country tales. And that's despite being born on the banks of the Mississippi across from Louisiana. Smith used a variety of pseudonyms. At France for 1962's Strange Harem, he used Jan Hudson, an oft-used moniker supposedly shared by others. For the other 2 titles at France, A Place Named Hell, and Flames of Desire, he used M.J. Deere, misprinted as M.D. Deere on the latter's title page. These 2 titles are of just 4 at France that boldly blend erotica with sci-fi, and they were co-written by Jane, his wife, Mary Jane Deere Smith, our only female writer at France. At present, very little is known about her. First appearing in his 1977 zine Science Fiction Collector, SF Pornography, is a list compiled by Kenneth R. Johnson. It now exists online, last updated in 2016. In it, Flames of Desire is described thusly. Princess Yolande tries to conquer a future America ravaged by a nuclear holocaust. I haven't read A Place Named Hell yet, but it's a sextupped version of the novella Narakan Rifles About Face, which Smith wrote as Jan Smith for Planet Stories in January of 1954. I've linked you all to it in the description below. It's really good. It's practically a World War II story, but with aliens. Terence O'Mara, the protagonist, is great. George H. Smith went on to write over 60 to 70 books, for which I can account for publishers like Monarch, Belmont, and Greenleaf. In 1968, he wrote Who is Ronald Reagan for Pyramid Books, a supposedly critical view of the man who was then the former president of the Screen Actors Guild, the current governor of California, and who a little over a decade later would be a 2-term president of the United States. When Russian President Vladimir Putin started mentioning nuclear weapons during the war in Ukraine, I read Doomsday Wing, a Cold War tale from 1963, coming off the heels of the Cuban Missile Crisis. In the late 1970s and early 80s, Smith wrote historical works of sorts. They appear to be marketed practically like romances. These were published by Playboy Press, which has no physical branding to associate it with Hugh Hefner's Playboy Group Incorporated. George passed in 1996. Thanks for tuning in. See Elon Musk. AI isn't so scary. See you next time, boys and girls.